Shalom, people. This is Brother Laos coming at you with another video. And as I look at the mass of migrants flooding into this nation, it just brings home the fact to me that they're basically trying to show us as black people that they don't need us anymore. They're trying to show us that, in my opinion, these people are your replacements. And we as black people, we're being put between a rock and a hard place right now. Because you see that the migrants, particularly those from Mexico, Latin America, Central America, are doing what they need to do to survive. Their countries have been destabilized by the United States because of the drug wars that going on down there, because of America's insatiable appetite for drugs, and because of America's boycotts and embargoes of countries like Venezuela that they pretty much destroyed, because Hugo Chavez had a socialist type nation where he said everybody benefit, everybody get free electricity, everybody can go to school, all these things in America, because of Chevron, the oil giant that felt that they didn't want to share their revenue with the Venezuelan people, destroyed that nation. Then let's look at the others. Nicaragua, what they did to Nicaragua, because they said that they didn't want them dealing with the Soviets. Look what they did to destabilize Panama with the invasion of Panama. All up and down, they have destabilized those Hispanic nations. And Colombia itself is trying to dig itself out of all those decades of, the wars going on, dealing with cocaine and infighting amongst them. A lot of it being pushed by CIA and special forces going down there. Just look at the movie Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford from the 1990s, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And so we see this flood, not just people from Latin America, Central America, there's other groups within there, but I want to primarily concentrate on the Hispanic people, the Latin American people, right? Primarily for cause of what I just stated, but also the fact that they're almost forcing a confrontation between us and the people from the Hispanic Latin American countries. Not that there are not black people down there in some of those Latin American countries, which there are, but there is such a minuscule amount of people that still can retain some of their African heritage that is down there in a lot of those countries, that they're pretty much off the radar. But we see, as they bringing them into this nation, which is not a new thing. We know that they're especially particular in the Southwest, in Texas and places like that, that Texas used to be basically part of Mexico, and then when it broke off, Texas was its own country. But there's always been that almost free flow of Hispanics back and forth through the Texas border, Arizona, New Mexico, all those different places right there. So it's not a new thing. But what it is when these Hispanics came across the border and started moving past Texas into other places within the United States, that we seen that they have been pushed, like every other immigrant is seen, into the black neighborhood. And it was not a intrusive thing in the sense that it made a dent at the beginning, because I can remember growing up and during harvesting time and different things like that, as more, especially in the 80s, as more and more black people start moving away from agriculture, moving away from farming and trying to get into industries and military and other places like that, the Hispanics and all those came in to start filling those jobs in the South. Whereas out in the West, my understanding is that's always been a thing that they've been doing. It's nothing new. But in the South, it became a big thing in the 80s. And I can remember it would be different little places here and around in this part of North Carolina where I'm from, these houses that would sit vacant until the harvesting time. And then you would see all these Hispanic families move in there. And then when the harvest was over, then they would go back to wherever they came. Well, we know what happened with Reagan in the 1980s, where he gave blanket amnesty to close to 5 million immigrants, which I think primarily were of Hispanic origin. And so to me, that was the beginning of what I believe was the end of us as black people, because when I grew up, you would see black construction crews all the time building houses. Most of the highway jobs, people working on the highways, were our people, all these kind of jobs. And as I went off in the military in the early 1980s, and I was, away for a little while, occasionally when I came back by myself, and then when I got married, come back with my family, I would start noticing there's no more black construction crews. Now we're seeing Hispanics building. Start seeing less and less of our people working on the road and more Hispanics. And over time, it got to be where there was no more black building crews, building houses. There was hardly any black people, men, working on the highways, except for maybe an occasional one you will see holding the sign. And it has got to that point that now, even in some parts of some different cities, even where I'm at, that there will be a wholesale swap out where these areas where black people once populated, now they're all Hispanic. And that, to me, was already planned. So I believe that the final phase of us being replaced is being played out before us right now. Do I blame the quote unquote Hispanic people for this? They're only trying to survive. They're only trying to do what they need to do because of the policies that America took to their countries. And I don't really think it's in the back of their mind, one way or the other. They just trying to survive. My problem is our leaders that were in positions of power have known this for a long time. They have seen this, even to when they understood that the drugs that were being pushed into our neighborhood coming from these Latin American countries, that they didn't speak up to after the fact, right? And that the mass incarceration of our men, because of the influx of drugs from these Latin American countries into neighborhoods where the economic opportunities had been cut back for the black man, was a perfect setup to leave these fatherless black families for the mothers to fend for themselves and to raise a generation of black men that now don't want to be married to black women. And if they get any kind of economic gain, it's not going to be put back into the black community, because they have allowed the crime to be so rampant that it's almost dangerous for you to let anyone know that you have any kind of gain in your communities. And therefore, because of this image that has been produced and all these different things, all this has been put into one big old pot and stirred up and showed to the public, particularly with the gangster rap music, entertainment, our style of dress, you know, the sagging pants, all this stuff, to make it easy for them to say, yes, let's push mass immigration of these migrants into these black communities, because they ain't nothing but a bunch of worthless gangsters. And our leaders have sat by, and indeed some of our people have played into that image in a very detrimental way, to where they're not going to feel bad when they bring these migrants in to some of these new apartments and these new developments that they're building. And even though the fact that they know that a lot of the homelessness that's in this country is our people, they're not caring, as we have seen in Chicago, where they made tent cities for the migrants. They made vacant buildings livable. They opened them up, and the federal government has been siphoning in money to these metropolitan cities that were once chocolate cities like Chicago and Philadelphia, to house these migrants, because there are new replacements. But the thought came to my mind, and it always has been, the fact that we know that this Western Hemisphere, talking about Canada, America, Mexico, Central America, South America, was the home of the Indians. From Alaska, Canada, on down to the tip of South America. These was the habitation of the Incas, the Mayans, the Choctaw, whatever the other kinds of Indian nations, which we know the term Indian came from white people, but whatever kind of people was, we'll say the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, populated this. And we know that there was always talk of the quote unquote New World. But this part of the world had hundreds of millions of inhabitants. It was not a lost world. It was not a New World. It had always been inhabited, you see. And so when the Western powers came over, they so dramatically changed the outlook of this hemisphere from Canada, Alaska on down, were tremendous changes. And the thought in my mind came, why does it seem to me like that the Hispanic people are not looking at the part of who they are tied to the native people that were here? Because I'm saying to myself, I know that the base of who they are started before the European came as these indigenous people, as these Indians, as these Mayans, as these Incas, as these Aztec people. And I said to myself, how much of who they are is made up of those same Indians that populated this whole Western Hemisphere, so that they have within them a understanding that I'm not coming into America anew. I'm just coming back to what my indigenous ancestors already had. And so I wanted to look at the percentage of the DNA that they said that Hispanic people had in them, to try to help my mind wrap around the fact that maybe this is why I said they're coming into here and they don't have any, and I ain't even say they should have any shame per se, but they didn't have no kind of shame coming in here to America and doing the things they did, because in my mind I'm thinking, oh, they just coming back to the land that was once theirs, or the inhabitants of the indigenous inhabitants of the land. So I looked at the percentage starting in Mexico. Okay, so in Mexico, the Hispanic people there, it says that 56% of of their DNA can be tied back to the indigenous Indians of this hemisphere. 37% of who they are is European, and 5% of who they are is African. So you can see that the base of who they are is the Indians that once inhabited this hemisphere, whether it's Aztec, Choctaw, whatever. I'm just saying, because we know that they were all somehow tied together from Alaska on down to the tip of South America. These Indians were a group, maybe not having the same language, maybe not having some of the same physical characteristics, but they were indeed a people of themselves that was united, even into the Caribbean with the Taino Indians. So then I said, let me see what the percentage of DNA of Latin people here in America, how much of that is Indian. And it showed where 18% of the Latin people that were maybe born here in America or came here in America and been here for a while, 18% of who they are is Indian. 75% of who they are is European, and 6.2% of who they are African Americans. And so we, just by using simple logic, know that 37% European of those in Mexico, and that 65% of those here in America of the European blood came from somewhere else. So that the introduction of the European to this Western Hemisphere has thrown them off tremendously, even more so than us. We understand that as black people, as Hebrew people, at the end of the Civil War, there was close to 500,000 mulattoes that were reported. But there was still about 3 million, about 3 million of us that were in the South. So the Most High was gracious to us that he did not allow what happened to them to happen to us. Because what it ended up doing, as America bought up all this land out the West and the Louisiana Purchase and all these different things, they started moving out these Indian nations down into Mexico. And then we talking about what Canada did to the Indian population up there in Canada. And then what the Spanish were doing in the Caribbean islands, what the English were doing in the Caribbean islands, what they were doing in the Central America, South America. They were shifting the perception of some of these people to be engaged more with the European of who they are than that Indian part. But during that civil rights era that I told you about, whereas they were concentrating, the Spanish nations in Mexico, Central America, South America were primarily looking at who they were as pertaining to the Europeans. Within that civil rights movement, as black Americans start saying, I'm black and I'm proud, and all these things, there was also a movement within the Hispanic community called the Chicano movement, where they were saying, you know what, we have been concentrating too much on that European side of who we are. Let's go back and look at this Indian part of who we are, of these people that once all this land was ours. Because before that, yes, Hispanic people were coming in here. Yeah, they were, but not in the numbers that they had, I believe. But as America started destabilizing their nations down there and made it unlivable, I also believe that inside of who they were, as some white politicians were trying to tell some of the Hispanic people that were coming into this nation, hey, you can align yourself as being white, that there was also within that of the immigration that they were going to start flooding in here. There were those in that had the mind that said, you know what? The Indian part of who we are was once the totality of who we are. And the totality of who we are was that all this land belonged to us. So you know what? We're not going to relegate ourselves just to Mexico anymore. We're not going to relegate ourselves just to Central America or South America. We're going to come back into the lands that were once our forefathers, which included America. And we're going to somewhat of take it back because it belonged to the indigenous people at one time who were us before they diluted us down to the 56% and the 18% Indian. And that I believe that is another reason why we are seeing this flood back into this nation, of these nations, yes, because of the destabilization of the U.S. policy in their countries, but also the fact that they're saying at one time when our forefathers were full-blooded Indians, whatever they were, Aztec, Mayan, Incan, whoever, all of this belonged to us. From Alaska on down to the tip of South America, it all belonged to us. And therefore, now that we definitely know that the white population is going down, now it is ours for the taking again. Let's flood into it and take it back. And that's what they're doing. And what is our reaction to be for as black people to this? We can look at it this way. This is not our native land. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, you were born in it, but your DNA of who you are did not originate here in the Western Hemisphere. It originated there in Africa. It originated there in Africa. When I say Africa, I'm talking about, for those of you that know that some of us here in America are Shemitic people, that includes what they call the Middle East, but at one time was called North East Africa. That includes that part also. We can look at it in the sense of, as they flood in here, we have to, just as they in the nations that some of their forefathers were pushed into, because we know that a lot of Indian tribes that were on the other side of the border, as the Americans came out west, were on this side of the U.S.-Mexico border and were pushed into Mexico along with all those other Indian tribes that were there, that were being mixed out by the Spanish, the Germans and the French, who at one time occupied Mexico. That just as it was awakened within us in the last decade or so, a look back toward Africa, in the sense of that's where our forefathers came. Within them, the Hispanics, those especially of the Chicano movement, that know, hey, at one time, this numbers of percentage of DNA that we got was thrown off by the invasion of the Europeans. So we're looking at total retakeover of what once belonged to us that was stolen, and saying America is included in that. And devil, we step on the devil's head of anyone that would impede us from coming back in something that was once owned by our indigenous ancestors. We can, as Black people, try to hold on to whatever we say is ours, but as it was stated on this one program I was looking at, if you don't own the land anyway, if you don't own the houses and the facilities and these different things of these different cities where you're living at, in Chicago, Philly, whether it's even a little small southern towns that you live in, that you might own a few acres, but we know that the majority of land ownership in this country is not ours anyway. What can we really fight back with? We have no economic power, which is one of the reasons why, again, I believe, Caucasian people are allowing these people to come in to push us out, but I also believe that within inside of them, there's awakening for them to say, you know what, let's retake this Western Hemisphere back from these Caucasian people. We know that their numbers are going down. We know that we got people in place that are going to facilitate us when we come in, and we going for it. We are going for it, because at one time it all belonged to our indigenous ancestors anyway, and America owes it to them. Because if we're talking about the reparations that they owe us for some of these Hispanic people, in particular Mexicans, because I was looking at this article here that came out in 2014. It says here in this article titled "Genetically, There's No Such Thing as a Mexican." In the article, the writer says this. He said, before the Spanish conquerors arrived in the 16th century, Mexico was inhabited by Native Americans who had carved out their own land, their own often isolated kingdoms. Their genetic differences show up even today. The team at Stanford, the University of California, San Francisco, and Mexican National Institute of Genomic Medicine found. They said Mexico harbors one of the largest amounts of pre-Columbian genetic diversity in the Americas. So that means that you seen that some of the tribes that were in Mexico at one time were here in America. So it's like as it's being wakened within us, some of us, not all of us, but some of us to look back to, hey, Africa, or for us who know that we are the people, hey, the what they call the Middle East is awakening within us to look back. I believe also it's being awakened within them, and the Most High. We know the Bible says that He controls all things. He's opening up the door for some of them to come back in here to what was once their indigenous ancestors' land. Now, do I agree with them pushing us out of our neighborhoods? Do I agree with them coming in and terrorizing our elders and our children? No, of course I don't. But unfortunately for us, because we still scattered and dispersed, we're still subject to some of the things that we're going through. And we know, just like when we were in the South and the oppression from the sharecropping and all that stuff was too much for us. The lynching was too much for a lot of us. What did the Most High do? He scattered us. When the Black Wall Streets were starting to be brought down, He scattered us. So this, to me, is going to be an inevitable that sooner, probably than later, if this immigration is continued at the pace that it is, there's going to be another scattering of us to where, I don't know. I will hope and believe that it would be to Africa, but I can't tell everyone, for sure that's where you need to go. But I believe whatever it's going to be, the Most High is going to make it very clear to us. But I do believe that He's making it very clear to us that these people are coming in, and it's not going to stop. And it's almost like they have a mandate to do it. Again, do I agree with them coming in and trying to oppress us and all these things? But it was a scripture that I wanted to read here in Jeremiah 50 that I think would bring a little clarity to what I'm saying, because I don't believe that this return of them is going to be a long-term thing, and I'm going to tell you why. But I'm going to read this in Jeremiah 50 and starting at verse 15, and then I'm going to explain what I'm saying. Jeremiah 50 and 15 says, shout against her. This is talking about Babylon, and we do believe America is not Babylon totally, but I believe it is the military arm of the Babylonian, of the revised Babylon and revised Rome also. It's the military arm. He says, shout against her round about. She has given her hand. Her foundations are fallen. Her walls are thrown down. Talking about the wall that Trump tried to pull up, the little Constantine wall that whatever they trying to pull up. Her walls have fallen down. Talking about Babylon. For it is the vengeance of the master. Take vengeance upon her as she has done, so do unto her. So as America destabilized these nations in these different countries, in particular those here in the Western Hemisphere, now that's being done to them. Well, America destabilized their countries where people was flowing in and out, and they was flowing in arms and drugs and all these things and destabilized. Now the same thing is being done to America. Verse 16, and this is the point right here. He said, cut off the sower from Babylon, and him that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. For fear of the oppressing sword, they shall turn every one to his people, and they shall flee every one to his land. So you see where it says those walls of America were going to be brought down, and the enemy, the people were going to come in, right? They were going to come in, which, like I say, I know that it's not just Hispanics that's coming across the border, but primarily it has been them. For mainly the immigration that has been happening in this country since it came into inception has been those of the Latin American nations coming in and out. But in this case, they start flooding in, right during the 60s, whatever, and then it picked up during the time, like I said, where Reagan gave them that 5 million amnesty, and it just been pushing in. But it says something here in verse 16. This is why I'm saying you can't make this stuff up. We know that primarily the agriculture industry was what the Hispanic people, a lot of them were being brought in here to do what? To farm, to do the harvesting for a lot of these white farmers. And what has happened in the last couple of years, they said because of them trying to stop the flow of the immigrants and everything, there has been some years, in the last couple of years, of the harvests have rotted on in the fields, have rotted on the vine or whatever. And so verse 16 said, cut off the sword from Babylon, and he that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. So they're flooding in right now. But we know that with all this stuff that's going on in what they call the Middle East and all over this country's wars, world, all these different countries, wars and all this stuff, it says, for the fear of the oppressing sword, they shall return everyone to his people, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. Remember, like I said, they do, I know, believe that this is part of their land. And I do believe they're going to flood in here. But I believe it's going to get to a point where they're going to say, you know what? Yeah, this America was once our land, but we see that this nation of America, alone of the nations in the Western Hemisphere, because I don't believe that Canada is going to stand with America when the attack's coming. But I believe these Hispanics, these people that are flooding into this country right now, I believe once they perceive that, hey, we got to we're going to give it back to America. Because what America right now is trying to get them to identify as being Caucasians when they come in here to boost their numbers up, to basically be somewhat of their replacements and to be antagonistic against us. And they're trying to get that antagonism. But I believe as they see that America is getting ready to come down, it says, every man shall flee to his people, and they shall flee every man to his own land. Right now, a lot of Hispanics are identifying with that, what's that percentage I said of European, of that 37% European or that 65% European in them. But as they see America getting ready to come down, they're going to start identifying with that indigenous Indian part of who they are, that 56%, that 18%, and they say, you know what, let's just flee on back to Mexico. Let's flee on back to Central America. Let's flee on back to South America and let America crash down. We're gonna let them go back. We'll rob it. We'll take everything that we can out of it. And as we see whatever forces are getting ready to come on into this country, we're gonna flee back to our own people. We're not gonna identify as being European anymore. We're not going to identify with that part of who we are anymore, because we know that America is going down. And you can see here in verse 16 of Jeremiah 15, what did it say about us as Israel? It said, Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away, for the king of Assyria has devoured him. And last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has broken his bones. Therefore, thus saith the master of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, behold, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land as I have punished the king of Assyria. And I will bring Israel again to his habitation, and he shall feed on Carmel and Bashan. So we're in another land now. We're not in Babylon no more, because he said we have been broken. Our bones have been broken. We have been broken down. He said, but I have punished them enough. Now, verse 19, he said, I'm going to bring them again to Israel. Now, do I believe we're going to go straight from here to Israel? No, I believe it's going to be a gathering of us, some kind of way of a massive amount of us to get out of here, just as we start seeing those Hispanic people. Let me put it this way. What they said last year, and I said this in another video, about 2 million, close to 3 million immigrants came into this country, mostly from Latin American countries. When we start seeing 2 million people or more leaving this nation, we need to be thinking about, we might need to be getting up ready to get out of here. Because I believe they're going to be the canary in the coal mine for what we need to look for when it's time for us to get. When we start seeing some of them Hispanics say, you know what? Chicago was okay. LA was okay. Philly was okay. I got everything I need. I was able to work a couple of years and send some money back to my family. But I see something is on the horizon. Something getting ready to happen. I got enough. Boom, I'm getting ready to leave. And we start seeing them leave. We need to be thinking about the Most High is getting ready to make his move. And just like he said here in Jeremiah 19, I'm finna move their habitation from Babylon. I'm going to move them back. And he said, in those days, verse 20, in that time, said the master, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, and there shall be none. And the sins of Judah, they shall not be found, for I will pardon them. So we should see a general return of our people to some God consciousness, if you want to use that word. We're already seeing it somewhat, but the devil is confusing. Does that mean all of us? No, I don't believe all, but I have to believe there's got to be such a significant move of enough of our people to understand that we got to get ourselves right, that we're not going to be, like I said, all of us in that mindset. But I do believe that if ever a time that we cry out for the Most High, not just to show us his will for us, but also to pour out the spirit of repentance upon us, is now, right? Because like I said, once we start seeing the Hispanic population returning back into their Latin American countries, Mexico and all those places, because they're not going to go down with this country. Like I said, they understand, yeah, America was once the land of our indigenous ancestors. And we are going up and getting what we can out of this nation while it's still an economic engine. America is still an economic engine. They're coming, most of them. All I can say is let's just say as an individual, follow peace with all men. Because it could be very well that as they see the oppressing forces of America coming this way and they start trickling back or flooding back into Mexico, into Panama, into South America, that we're going to be flooding back with them. We're going to be getting out of here with them to try to get out of this country and get over to wherever it is. It could be that we're going to have to go back through Mexico, through Central America, down into South America, and then on over to the continent of Africa. That could be, and if we are, what word can I use? Hostile for no good reason, right? I'm not saying that some of them are not going to come over here and try to be hostile toward us. And of course, you got to stand up for yourself. You got to defend yourself. You got to speak up for yourself. You know, like the people in Chicago, they say, hey, you know, you can't put these people in our park. This is what we use to survive. So we're not going to let them go. But that's not Let's not be having us going down to that border with some of those militias and all these different crazy people that they got 700,000 truckers getting ready. No black trucker be going down there to no border trying to stop no immigrants from coming in here. Don't no black person join no militia and go down there. Do you understand that they putting us in a rock and a hard place? The Republicans and Democrats are both laughing at us to see if they can get enough black people to be wearing the MAGA hats and enough black people to, keep saying, oh, y'all black people lazy anyway. So y'all got, see, you know what I'm saying? They playing us, and our leaders, our shepherds, our worthless shepherds, do not follow their lead. In the same chapter, and we get ready to end this lesson, same 50th chapter of Jeremiah, look at what it says about us. Verse 6, he said, my people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned them away unto the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill. They have forgotten their resting place. All that found them have devoured them. And their adversaries said, we offend not, because they have sinned against the master, the habitation of justice, even the master, the hope of their fathers. Remove out of the midst of Babylon and go forth out of the land of Chaldea and be as the he-goats before the flocks. So this is what he said our shepherds have done. They had turned aside. They're sitting there laughing. They're sitting there up in those meetings saying that tell your people you're going to give them resources and you know you're not. This is a time where we who are believers, who are righteous, who are being righteous, not just saying righteous, that you got to do the do. You got to get out there and ask the Most High to make a way for you to take care of your family. If he takes care of the little birds and he's taking care of some of these immigrants coming through the jungles, coming through the deserts, how much more can he do for us who are righteous, who can declare with certainty, because you know you have lived a righteous life, that never have I seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread, that I don't have to be concerned that my family's going to have to go out there and live out in the woods somewhere in some of these tent cities that we see popping up. Understand what I'm saying. Poverty can happen to anybody. But the Bible said if your ways please the master, he said he'll make even your enemies be at peace with you. And again, it comes back to these communities, these apartment buildings, some of these houses that you're renting, they don't belong to you. This land does not belong to you. And it doesn't even belong to the Caucasian people. It once theirs, but it's been so much blood and stuff spilled on this land of America for what they did, and also what they did to us, that y'all said he gonna destroy this land. And so after those indigenous people who this land once belonged to get what they're gonna get out of the land, they're gonna move out. And so the Most High is trying to break our brain that this is gonna be our forever home. He's trying to break it by letting them come back into what was once theirs, to get us to start looking to what was once ours. Because he said what? They have forgotten their resting place. But that's why he's been waking us up in the last 10 years to realize this is not where we come from. Not even that Africa totally for some of us was our resting home, but it was also a place that we passed through to get to where we were here to fill out, for finish our punishment. But there's going to be a reverse back through. And then that's this land, because of all the blood shed and all these things for what they did. Just go back and read the whole 50th chapter of Jeremiah. You understand why the Most High said he got to destroy Babylon. That he got to destroy it, and he got to break our mind that this is going to be our home. That just as the Hispanics are the returned to this land, we're going to be the returned in phases to our land. I don't believe you're gonna just pick us up and just boom. I believe it's gonna be in phases, and I don't know how it's gonna be. I don't know if it's gonna be 1,000 at a time, 10,000. I don't know how it's gonna be, but I know just as the Spanish returned back to this land, and it was an awakening in them in the 1960s of the Chicano movement to say, hey, we were once the Indians that possessed all of this. And so it is going to be for us. So with that, I'm going to ask you to give this video a thumbs up. I'm going to ask you to leave a comment. I'm going to ask you to subscribe. And I'll say this. Look, the master blessed me a couple of years ago that there was a brother, Hispanic pastor. I don't know if he's still pastoring. He was from Guatemala. They invited me to his church to preach a couple of years ago. This is before, like I said, I still was kind of dibbling dabbling with the Christian church, and I came out finally all the way. But it was a blessing. What I did state to him and to his congregation when I did preach, I said, look, I understand what you're being told about us as black people. And then, yes, it is some bad elements amongst us. I said, but please, whatever you do, please don't come here and look down on us, because we have bared the burden in the heat of the day, where I know y'all have went through some things too. But in this land that, yeah, it might have been your ancestors, but they pushed y'all out and put us in place by force. We didn't ask. So when you come here, as they let you come in, please be understanding and please be courteous of the little bit that we have been able to carve out from this country, that it's not ours to take or to give to you right now, because, you know, we're not the propagators of it. So with that, I'm going to say you to keep that in mind as we deal with some of these situations, that I don't think that these people per se want to make themselves quote unquote our enemy, but they're desperate people, and they rather ask forgiveness and permission because the things that's going on amongst some of them. So with that, be blessed.